Hi, Nancy.
Welcome to episode 90 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets twice a month.
We like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab your book and iced tea and join us on the front porch.
Well, Linny, when we recorded our interview with Terryl Hallquist, you were actually joining from North Carolina. You're home now. So tell me about your time deployed with the American Red Cross in Asheville.
Oh, well, lots to say, I guess. When we're there, we're working a lot of hours, and that's okay. We all know what we're expected to do when we get there. My particular role is that of disaster mental health. I got to participate in a lot of activities working directly with the people of Asheville and in surrounding counties. There's a lot of devastation there.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a while for North Carolina to recover, but they've made tremendous progress already and still have a ways to go. But I like serving. I like helping out. So that's what I did. And then I'm trying to do our podcast, and then that didn't go so well because my computer died on me. I think it's the user. It's always the user in my book. I unfortunately didn't get the entire interview.
No.
But you carried on well after me, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, our listeners will note at some point we never hear from Linny again.
It's the user. It's always the user. I know it was me.
And then since we last recorded, even before we talked to Terryl Hallquist, I was in York visiting you, and we had a great time.
We did have a great time. We did some photo shoots.
Yep.
And we hung out and we ate good food. We had a splendid time together. And then you went off to New York City and saw lots of plays.
Lots of shows and got together with some friends. Yeah, had a great time.
And then during that time, I went to Asheville.
Right. I was playing and doing completely frivolous things, and you were serving victims of a natural disaster.
Okay. Now, going to plays is awesome and not frivolous. It's
okay.
But we were each doing the things we love to do.
For sure. We did have a great interview with Dr. Terryl Hallquist about Ann Patchett's Tom Lake. Terryl Hallquist is a professor emerita of theater at Vanderbilt University Department of Theater, where she taught for 33 years. Her emphasis was acting and directing, including directing a production of Our Town, among many other shows. She is a member of the board of directors of the Thornton Wilder Society and is the performance review editor of the Thornton Wilder Journal. She earned her PhD in directing and theater history from the University of Michigan, and she received her undergraduate degree in theater education and studio art from Nebraska Wesleyan University, right here in Lincoln. And we have had a number of wonderful guests from Nebraska Wesleyan University.
We really have. Yeah. Great. Let's get to it.
Welcome, Terryl, to the front porch.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're so excited to have you join us today. Can you tell us how you got started in and interested in the theater?
I would say that I was first interested in dance. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was at that point that a woman came and started the Omaha Ballet, and I took classes, and so I then joined the company just as a very young chorus, but I love dance. When I realized, as I guess we all do eventually, that our bodies aren't set up to do that particular profession, I decided there was other ways I could use my wanting to perform, and that would be the theater. So then I got very involved in theater in, I guess, high school first.
Wow. And then you went on to major in theater at our beloved Nebraska Wesleyan University here in Lincoln. And we have, in fact, had several faculty members from Nebraska Wesleyan on the podcast. But how did you make the decision to major in theater and then continue on to get your PhD?
It wasn't even a decision. It was just like, and of course, my parents both went to Nebraska Wesleyan, and so it just seemed like fine. Yes, it's a good program, and I'll do that. My husband and I, we actually met in high school and did theater together, and then went to Nebraska Wesleyan together, and then did a gap year. Then decided to go to graduate school and applied, and then got married, and off we went to Michigan. We were both accepted, so
Amazing.
it was great.
So this month we are reviewing Ann Patchett's novel, Tom Lake. A lot of the book centers around a summer stock theater production of Thornton Wilder's Our Town. At the end of the book, Patchett says she hopes the book will turn readers back to our town and all of Wilder's work. She says, and I quote her, "Therein lies the joy." You've been very involved in promoting Thornton Wilder as a member of the board of directors of the Thornton Wilder Society and performance review editor of the Thornton Wilder Journal, along with scholarly articles you've written about Thornton Wilder and productions that you've done of his work. So tell us about Thornton Wilder and his work.
Oh boy, well, I don't know if we'll get to anything else then. To me, he's just an icon of American literature, amazing man that probably has not been celebrated as much as he should have been. That's why I like being on the journal, so that I can promote Thornton Wilder and keep him alive to the world, not just scholars or theater people or English professors. I mean, I really think he's an important writer. I mean, he had an amazing classical education and how he's folded that into everything. And, won Pulitzer Prizes for not only dramatic literature, but also for novels. It's really amazing and such a lively, wonderful, giving spirit, which I like too. I guess what I feel like with the journal is that it's a way for me to put him forward to anybody who would like to know about him.
In some ways, he's kind of thought of as the quintessential American author and playwright. Can you tell us a little bit about where he grew up, some of his highlights in terms of his writing, the time period that he lived in, and how he responded to what he was experiencing in the culture around him?
Well, he was born a little before the turn of the last century. And he died in the 1970s then. So he lived a nice long life. He grew up not grew up at all, for a small time in Wisconsin, which as a boy, I believe he liked the most. But when his father became an ambassador for the United States to China, his father thought it was very important that his children get educated abroad and not stay in one place. So he was a little bit in California. He was in China. So his education's all over the place. Even though he wanted to go to Yale right off the bat when he finally was of age to go to Yale, his father said, no, you're going to go to your first 2 years to Oberlin, and then you'll go to Yale. His mother, though, not to say that she didn't have a huge input into his growing up years. I mean, she was such an educated woman herself, knew not as many languages as Thornton Wilder, but certainly was fluent in at least 2, maybe 3, and loved poetry, loved literature. So she was very much a person that when her husband was gone in China, then she held down the fort and made sure that the children were reading and having experiences, going to concerts, plays, in order to enrich themselves. And he soaked all of that up like a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably, I've never heard of this man.
That's why I think it's important.
But why should we care about him, or what makes him so great besides writing this play?
Besides Our Town, the other play that he is quite well known for is The Skin of Our Teeth. And then also a play that he wrote called The Matchmaker that began as The Merchant of Yonkers with help of the director. I think it was Tyrone Guthrie. He wrote it into The Matchmaker. And then it was picked up and made into a musical, Hello, Dolly. So I bet you've heard of Hello, Dolly at least.
I have heard of Hello, Dolly.
Okay, well, that's from his play, The Matchmaker.
Okay. So Our Town. I had heard of Our Town too, but I've never seen it. It is called the greatest American play ever written. Can you tell us a little bit about why that play is so important?
I think it just keeps alive things that we know and things that we need to pay attention to. He always called himself, as a playwright and a novelist, a witness. He wasn't trying to persuade anybody to think a certain way. He was just witnessing what was going on around in the world and then presenting it, and I guess guiding us to that realization that we need to pay attention because we only have, if we're lucky, 100 years. And so that's our town. And it's interesting because each generation, each decade, each year, theater artists will find themselves or their world reflected in our town and then want to present that in various ways. One huge way is the new production that's on Broadway now. It's been on Broadway now, I want to say, 5 times over the years. But professionally, it's all over the place. It's said it's not just professional productions, but it's all the way to high school productions, college productions, that every night or day of the year, our town is being done somewhere in the world. That's how, I guess, important it is that people still respond to it, and not just Americans. It's been done in many other countries. To me, that speaks volumes of why he's an important influence and a voice that we need to keep listening to.
It sounds like it's sort of a universal message.
Right. When Emily, in the third act of Our Town, dies in childbirth and then realizes she wants to go back to visit. She thinks she can relive a time again in her life. And why should she not try if she could? And everybody that the other dead are saying, no, don't do it. And she said, well, but I want to. I really want to. And they said, well, don't pick an important day. Pick the most inconsequential day of your life, and it'll be as important enough. And so she is allowed by the stage manager, who is our sort of godlike character that takes us all the way through the play, to go back. And she picks her 12th birthday, and she can't even get through the whole day. She realizes that they don't really look at each other. That it's not the stuff that's important. It's the interaction with human beings that's important, that she never realized until too late, because she can't go back and fix anything. She just has to witness it herself. So it's usually a shattering moment in the play.
It's a play, I think, that captures the preciousness of every moment of life and
Absolutely. Yeah.
confronts us with the fact that we do not recognize the preciousness of every moment of life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Terryl, I was just in New York City, and I know you were also just in New York City. I saw loads of Broadway and off-Broadway shows, but you had a very special experience there and saw the revival of Our Town on Broadway and also meet Ann Patchett.
The Wilder Society, which we give an award to an artist we deem deserves it because her work celebrated Wilder. And this is given in joint with the Wilder family. I was then in attendance the next night. There was an open session between Patchett, the director of Our Town, Jim Parsons, the stage manager, and then the Wilder family's literary director was also there moderating. And so I just got to hear them. I mean, I've written to Ann Patchett once and got an email back. This is way back when I wanted to interview her for the Journal. And she said, I have nothing new to say about him. Thank you anyway. So that's my only connection, except for many years, her husband was my internal medicine doctor.
Oh,
And I even said that to her in the email when I was trying to get her to let me interview her.
What did you think about the new production of Our Town on Broadway?
Of course, anytime Our Town's put on in that grand way in such an important place as New York, you can't help but just be so excited. So I liked a lot of it. Yeah, I didn't expect to like Jim Parsons as much as I did like him as a stage manager. I really delighted in him. I loved some of the design, and I loved a lot of the acting. So I thought it was well worth it, and it's worth anybody should go see it. I mean, it's really, if you have a chance, it's not to be missed. Anytime one can get to see Our Town, you should. In fact, I'm going to a production down in Nashville this Sunday because Tennessee Rep is doing it. So I'll be reviewing that one. So anytime you can see Our Town, you should be there. And Linda, you really need to step it up.
I think I would like the newer version I think I would like seeing that. But let's get to the book now. The book this month is Tom Lake, and the main character of the book, Laura, stumbles into her early career in acting because of her convincing portrayal of Emily, who is obviously the main person in our town. What do you think it takes to play Emily? And did Patchett get it right?
Oh, gosh. She describes it so well in the book about, that she's the smartest girl in the class. She asks good questions. She speaks her mind. She speaks the truth. Those are huge things about Emily. Now she's an ingenue. So even though it's interesting, Kenny Leon, who directed Our Town, said to Ann Patchett, "You could play Emily. It doesn't matter about age. You could play Emily." Which she was like, "Yeah, right." But still, I mean, there's something to it. I think she's the girl that everyone wishes they were or thought they were or strove to be in high school. She's just a lovely, lovely character.
So there's also Uncle Wallace. That's the actor's TV name. He plays the stage manager. Joe Nelson also does very differently.
Yes.
How do you, as a director, allow actors to shape the character in ways that suits them?
I think, of course, in order to have it be true, it needs to come from the actor. It can't be something they've applied to be. So a director, I believe, needs to guide that as they're directing. With Uncle Wallace in Ann Patchett's book, he's a celebrity to so many people because he was on TV. So they all love him and they don't expect him to be anything but that. And so a lot of the personality that he was came through apparently, and people loved it. Although apparently, according to Lara, who played Emily at Tom Lake, she believed he was a really good stage manager, her best stage manager she ever had. It just that authority to guide us. Again, you expect him to tell you the truth too, because he seems to know everything. He can stop and start the action the way he wants to. And then, of course, Joe, coming in, the former director of that production at Tom Lake, he finally confesses somewhere in the book that, well, he did it, even though it was a horrible drive back and forth to Tom Lake from Traverse City, because he wanted to be on stage with Lara. He just thought she was such a wonderful Emily. And actually, that idea that it's said so many times in the book, you are the greatest Emily of all time. I'm going to say, are you kidding me? That's actually one place I thought, how many times has anybody told you that about? I mean, again, not as an actor playing a role, but just that they'll just stop the conversation and tell you how amazing you were. So it happens so often in that book that I just got, I guess, maybe jealous.
But over and over again, she responds back saying she was not a very good actress, rather that Emily was the right part for her.
Yeah.
And she also was very self-aware that she was aging out of that ingenue role.
Yeah.
Did you buy Lara's assessment of her own acting skill?
Right, I did, because she never studied acting. Not that you have to study acting. I don't want to say that, there are many great actors that probably had very few lessons and are doing just fine. But she just felt like she didn't have the chops to be able to go into something like May, which was the character she was then to follow her Emily with in Fool for Love. She just didn't know how to proceed. She didn't have any kind of guidepost. She couldn't act the emotional wherewithal that she needed for May. She could for Emily because it was right her age. She felt like she knew Emily. She had no idea about May. She just didn't. And I felt sorry for her. But I do believe that's true. Not every actor thinks they can play every part. It's really amazing if they can. Although I will say, I've listened to Meryl Streep's reading of Tom Lake, and she does such a beautiful job with all of the different voices. And we all know Meryl Streep's work over the years. If there is any actor that can play just about anything, it's Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
One idea that this author captures so well is that there's a summer retreat and it's a group of young people and I'm involved in each other's lives, and there's an intensity about that. And
yeah,
she describes it so wonderfully that you get that kind of atmosphere. My little lived experience being with very artsy people and things like that is that you do become like your own little family, and you kind of get lost in the world around you a bit. What is it about actors or plays that create that kind of intense ecosystem that seems to crowd out the rest of life?
Well, because you're so intently working on it for a concentrated time period, you do become a family. It's a wonderful little refuge, especially if you feel like in your own life you're having trouble with any kind of certainty. With a play, there's a beginning, middle, and end. It's comforting to be in the middle of that. Plus, if you like your cast and you like the director, and I mean, it's a wonderful little warm place to be. I certainly understand that. I felt that. Even retiring from Vanderbilt, and maybe that's why I stay connected with some of my students, because we did grow so closely together over the 4 years they were my students, and then especially if they were in a play of mine.
The other bubble that Ann Patchett portrays is the bubble of the pandemic and the family whose lives are on hold. I thought she very convincingly portrayed that. And it was almost like a parallel experience to her experience at Tom Lake. Here's Lara in two important periods in her life. Both times she's really kind of isolated from the rest of the world. What did you think about that pandemic bubble that she was living in, and its similarity to or difference from the bubble in the creation of a play production?
That's interesting. I didn't think of it in that context, but it is interesting that you've said that. I was lucky enough to attend at Harpeth Hall in Nashville. It was promoting her book to a big audience. And she speaks to that, about it being during the pandemic purposefully, because she'd spoken to so many of her friends who were going through it, who were mothers with their children home suddenly. And what a treasure that was for them, mostly.
Yeah.
But especially Laura thinks it's amazing that she gets to have her girls home with her, even despite domestic problems here and there. I thought it was a wonderful device. She used that. But she did say something that I thought was so interesting. Well, she did say that she based the three sisters off of a friend's three daughters. She says that she learned from her friends who were among their daughters that young women during the pandemic were thinking about these things: climate change, reproductive rights, the pandemic, the ability to love who you want to love. And I thought, now that is interesting, because you see all of that woven into her book, and that maybe the pandemic gave room for young people to think about it more because they suddenly were so isolated. I agree with you. She did a wonderful job of addressing that.
Very much so. That's funny. I was thinking that the three sisters were maybe an allusion to Chekhov, because there's certainly the mention of the cherry orchard by Chekhov.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
Fool for Love also. What did you think about Patchett's use of these classic theatrical works to illustrate some of the book's themes?
Certainly, I think Three Sisters had to enter into it too. She was just lucky to have a friend who had three daughters, modern daughters, but certainly, yes, that brings that to mind. And Patchett herself, you can tell listening to her or reading what she's written, that she herself has read so much. But again, at this particular book kickoff that I listened to, she talked about a person that became a friend, Aaron Anderson Whiting in Traverse City, who ran a theater company for 13 years there called Parallel 45. And even after the pandemic, the backers didn't come back. People came to watch the plays and they were excited, but she said, we couldn't continue without those backers. And so that's why they had to close. But Ann Patchett said, that's all right, because I can hire you now because you know everything about cherry trees and you know everything about theater. So it was a wonderful blend of Whiting and Patchett to work together with those characters from Chekhov and Fool for Love or any Shepard play. At the Thornton Wilder Award, she says, if I had to do it all over again, I would study acting in school. Then she went ahead and made a distinction. She goes, I have my Ann Patchett persona, which she would call a character, I guess is what she was saying. But who I really am is Mrs. Van Devender, and that's her husband, Carl Van Devender's name. I had an actor friend from the society behind me going, yeah, she was shaking her head. Yes, yes. All of us should study acting. And there's something to that, really. But I thought that was so interesting that she must have been so turned on by working with this theater professional that she had come to this realization.
It's interesting you talk about that theater closing in Michigan. Boy, theaters really have been negatively impacted by the pandemic.
Yeah, they have. It's tragic because so much entertainment now can be live streamed that people just don't want to get out in it anymore. It's sad, and many repertory companies are going by the wayside.
Yeah, I just saw a study that indicated that we are just all spending a lot more time at home than we did before the pandemic. It's like we got accustomed to accessing our entertainment online, and we have not moved back to the levels that we were in terms of experiencing theater together. What for you does it mean to experience theater in communion with other people versus online? Why is that important?
Well, it's like any communal experience because you're so close together and you actually help shape the play too. By your laughing, by your attention, by your coughing, that will affect what's going on stage. And every night is different because of the audience. Churchgoers would attest to that too. There's something much better about attending church than just sitting on the couch watching it online. And sports events, same way. It's something that human beings seem to need and benefit from. And that's what's so tragic about theaters having to drop out of existence.
Yeah. So you serve on the board of directors of the Thornton Wilder Society. Tell us about the work that this organization does.
Well, they're actually very involved in helping the journal with content. They are called upon themselves to write for the journal. They are the ones who very often are attending the conferences that are devoted to Wilder.
By the way, everyone who's listening, Linny dropped off a while ago. That's why Linny has not been talking. My question for you, Terryl, is have you been to Ann Patchett's bookstore?
Oh, yes, yes. It's just a darling little place. I love that she has her dog there. And I just think it's so great that it began with her co-owning it, and now she's taken over all of the owning of it, which is something that with her ability to keep writing is amazing to me that she can wear all those hats. She must never sleep, but she's fresh as a daisy, at least the last time I saw her, doing it all, very articulate and loving what she's doing. She makes you want to read every single one of those books. There's a Facebook group that weekly she gets on and talks about her favorite reads. And I can't believe she has time to even read them. It's unbelievable to me to write, to read, and to run this bookstore that is a whole nother skill set. I mean, most people do one of those things, but not Ann Patchett.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
So do you think Ann Patchett's desire to turn readers back to Wilder will be fulfilled through this book?
I hope so. Even though I believe anybody who hasn't read Our Town or doesn't know as much about it will still like the book. It really is enriched, of course, if you know Our Town, and then if you know Chekhov, and if you know Sam Shepard. So it's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, Linny definitely mentioned that she had not been familiar with Our Town, but she enjoyed the book. She felt like she learned a lot about Our Town, but she didn't need to have known the play in order to read and enjoy the book.
Good. And I do hope that people will read it and then think, Our Town, or any of Wilder's works.
Is there anything special that the Thornton Wilder Society is doing to capitalize on Tom Lake?
I think giving this award was huge for us. We really wanted to lift up Ann Patchett, but she said it was always going to be about our town, and she figured out how to make it about our town and this wonderful, beautiful story about a family. I did think it was interesting, though. Some critics had said, oh, well, it's too sweet by the end. It's unsatisfying because it's so pleasant. And she's liked the idea that Tom Lake is about love, change, work, family. And why can't you write about a loving family? You can't scrub your past, was what she said, and she stood by it. I mean, she wasn't saying, "Yeah, I should have, been a little tougher."
Well, in a way, it kind of reflects the themes in that Lara is very satisfied with her day-to-day life. She takes joy in the fact that she has her daughters. She has a husband who she loves. They have the work in the cherry farm. She's not looking for anything more. And in fact, the character of Peter Duke, who has achieved all kinds of worldly success through his fame in acting. All he wants is to return to that cherry farm and be buried there. So it's almost like a reflection of our town in some ways.
Yeah, I think Patchett, because she reads this book every year since she first was introduced to it, which is amazing to me, like at 14 or something, she began reading it. And she says every year since that time, she's read Our Town once a year.
What?
That's what she says. And I believe that, Patchett. Well, she has Laura in the novel say she absorbed the lessons. And I think that Ann Patchett has too. And she lets that go through Laura, that Laura knows to be cognizant of every moment and be grateful, which is a hard thing to do, really. And that's certainly Wilder's wish for us, that we are in the moment.
For sure. What are you working on next?
Well, like I say, I'm going to be writing a review of the Tennessee Our Town. So that's my next piece of work.
Tell us what you're doing as the performance review editor for the Thornton Wilder Journal.
I find the performances in the United States and internationally, if I can, and the professional performances we're looking to, or professional productions we're looking to have reviewed. And then I look for people who would like to review them, leaning on universities, theater departments, English departments. It's an academic journal, so we can't pay our viewers. And then working with them when they do get review written, eventually we have very nice reviews, I believe, and pictures from the productions, which give a snapshot of really how are these directors and designers and actors reflecting their culture within this wonderful play. And that's been interesting too.
And do you do performance reviews of all of Wilder's work, or do you concentrate on Our Town?
Oh, no. For example, one that we just did was an unfinished play by Wilder's called The Emporium, that a theater company called the Rude Mechs out of Austin have been working on, and worked with Alley Theater in Houston. The first year they did a staged reading, and then it finally came for a performance because they finished the play. So that was very interesting. They were saying, this is all inspired by Wilder. This is where, through our research, we felt like he might be going. This is how we ended it, but certainly this isn't the last call of how it should be ended. So that's exciting. We're finding unfinished plays of Wilder's in the library at Yale, the Beneke Library. And so I've got a colleague right now that's going to be submitting an essay about the Dreamers. He's hoping that he can inspire somebody that would want to maybe produce it and see how it worked. So that's exciting, digging up these things. That's one facet of what we do, but also finding out what they're doing internationally with it. I'm thinking of a German production that's coming up of, I think it's Skin of Our Teeth. But during the pandemic, I was able to find a reviewer for another production in England of A Skin of Our Teeth. But they had translated the title of, rather than The Skin of Our Teeth, We Got Away with It, which I think is so interesting because it's a whole different reflection on the whole thing by calling it that. There was a wonderful Greek production of The Matchmaker that we recently had reviewed that was so interesting design-wise. So that's what I love, is just seeing how designers from all over America, and if I can find someone to review something internationally, how they're grappling with Wilder still and how he inspires them to want to. And how the audiences, according to the reviewers, typically are responding. So it's really, I don't know, I feel like it's important work that we do. Just when you think you've heard it all about Our Town, okay, yeah, all right, how'd you do it? Something will come up that you never thought of. And you don't have to agree with it necessarily. I mean, I didn't agree with every single thing that they did, even in the New York Broadway production, but still they took a stance and they did it this way. And then it's up to you to think that was a good choice or not.
I think that this does show the relevance of Wilder's work, the continuing desire to put his works on stage so that we can think about what it means in our world today. That's the mark of a masterpiece, right?
Right. He doesn't go out of vogue. If he's not being used as a piece of theater, then it's really the culture's fault. It's not that he's gotten old-fashioned. It's just that we aren't attuned enough or open enough to realize what in the heck we've got in front of us. I guess that's why I continue doing what I do, just being a rah-rah for Thornton Wilder.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the front porch. Really enjoyed this conversation and getting to know the work you're doing and your thoughts about this book and all your experiences in the theater. Just fascinating.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
Well, Linny, I'm sorry you could not stay on for the entire interview, but it was a fabulous interview.
I'm sure the rest of it was.
We had a great time. After our interview, Terryl emailed me and noted that Ann Patchett herself had not seen a production of Our Town before seeing the latest Broadway production.
What?
Isn't that amazing? And she mentioned this when she was on that panel Terryl told us about. Kenny Leon, who is the director of the new Broadway production, and the rest of the people who attended that panel were astounded because Ann Patchett is so clearly a fan of Our Town and so clearly a fan of Thornton Wilder. So surprising.
How in the world did she write a book?
She reads Our Town every year, apparently. So she reads it, but she has never actually seen a production.
How interesting.
There are very few people who read plays. Like playwrights read other playwrights' plays. You know, I read plays, but you just don't run into many non-playwrights who read plays. But Ann Patchett is one of them.
Interesting. Well, you know what? In talking with our expert and in reading this book, I would like to see the new version of the play.
It seems like it would be pretty easy to jump on the train and go see it. Do you know what? This new production has gotten very good reviews.
That's what I've heard. So I think it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, stop by the front porch next time. It's December. And so you know what that means, Nancy.
Yes.
It's Children's Book Month to get ready for Santa Claus. We're going to be reading The King Penguin, and it's written by Vanessa Roeder.
I'm looking forward to it, and looks like a great book. Everyone, thanks for listening. Our website is frontporchbookclub.com.
Our episodes come out twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of each month.
See you next time, Linny.
See you, Nancy.